Howdy, all of you delicious people. I'm here today to review Ambulance. So, when I finished up this movie, I realized that it was a Michael Bay film. And I'm like, oh, so much of this makes sense now. Man, I don't know what it is with Michael Bay films, but it seems like they just keep, adding and adding and adding people in a Michael Bay film. And they really don't focus on character development because they have to rush the character development because hey man, we have to get to the bigger parts of the movie. We have to get to the action parts of the film, so anything else doesn't matter or really doesn't have a good enough story. It's just hey, we gotta get to that action, and once we get to the action, then we have to slow down. But then once we pick up again, we have to have people running with chickens and their heads cut off because they're just like, what's going on? Where are we going? Oh, the mad scramble of I don't know what's going on. Are we going left? Are we going right? Man, I would say that this is an okay movie. I would recommend people seeing it. Maybe not in a theater, but I don't know. You could if you have nothing else, because it doesn't feel like there's it doesn't usually feel like there's a lot of quality movies out there right now, for the past year. But the Adam Project is actually pretty good. I actually enjoyed that for once. It was like, wow, a movie in this year that actually garners a thumbs up from me, because I'm just not easily won over. I'm sorry. But going to this film, this movie is a mess. It's frustrating, but I still found some kind of enjoyment from it. Really, it's just one of those films where you just gotta just hang on for this movie. A lot of people would probably feel drastically different. A lot of people would just easily be like, "Yeah, I love this movie. This movie was great. Yeah, great." And I can sympathize with that. I can say yeah, I would say this is a good film. Some people may loathe and hate this film, and I could also just be like, well, I feel very middle of the road about things. So I don't want to put this movie on some kind of pedestal. I just feel like it's a very middle of the road movie. This is probably a good movie compared to some other stuff that may be out right now. Because it's very slim pickings for quality-eshed stuff. Because right now it's just kind of well, man, I can't wait till Morbius comes out. Can't wait to that Morbius. Can't wait to that Superman movie. Or that superhero movie, I mean. But anyways. I could probably go on and on about every single person that's in this movie. Just because I feel character development is not that good in this movie. Or who they choose to develop characters on doesn't make sense to me. It just feels like there's so many half-baked characters that are just kind of put out there and said, hey, yeah, go ahead and eat. And it's this isn't done yet. This character isn't done enough yet. Well, that's too bad, because this character is gonna die now. Wait, what? we haven't even gotten a coffee with this character, and you're already killing him off? Okay, sure, whatever. Just, it is what it is with this film. I guess we really had to show who were the most important characters in this movie. Um, Especially when we have like the FBI agent who kind of gets his like own little sliver of a thing before he gets into what he's going to get into, and then all of a sudden the FBI agent just knows all. He knows everything because he's an FBI agent. Anyways, pushing on. So, teeing it up, what is this movie about? Well, for the most point, it's a chase movie because of ambulance. So this is mostly a chase film where we find our main characters who are to be Will and Danny, who Danny is Jake Gyllenhaal, and Will, of course, is Yahya Abdul Malteen the second, who, of course, is this gentleman right here. Of course, if any of you have seen the more recent Candyman remake and maybe the Watchmen series, same guy. Same guy. Anyways, so Danny and Will are to perform a heist. And then after that heist, there's a jumbled, scrambled mess of wherever the heck that they're going. And there is so much freaking runaround. It's redonkulous with all of these characters. To where both Danny and Will end up forcibly needing to drive around in this ambulance to figure out a way to take forever to get away from these coppers. And once they do, like, there's still more stuff for these characters to continue to deal with. So, wow, what a film. There's so many tiny little moving parts with this movie, and like I would say that this movie, like, I don't like the pacing. Like, I feel like some parts of a slow slog of a film, because man, when I was to get like halfway through this film, I was kind of like, man, can we like, I'm only halfway through this film, really? Like, I thought I was almost done by now, because there's just so many moving parts with this one. But they stretch it. It's just like the weirdest like pacing that I've ever seen in a film, where it feels like this film is going like 60 miles an hour, but like it's also stretching. It's weird for that pacing. You know what I'm saying? It's just they slow down to do too many things. This is the weirdest review I've ever had. Anyways, so yeah, like, I feel like that sounds very confusing, but once you go into the movie, you'll probably still not understand exactly what I'm saying. I'm trying to speak English here, but it is what it is. So, with that said, let's just go into spoilers about this movie so I can help everyone understand a little bit more about this film. Where can you go to technically see this movie? A theater, that would be one. But if you like, I feel like this movie's okay, but I don't know if it's like theater worthy. More than likely, this movie is gonna conveniently end up on like some kind of Netflix, Hulu, something somewhere. So, like, I don't know if this is really theater worthy movie. I would have just said like this movie should just go to a streaming thing somewhere. I feel bad about that because a lot of people probably wouldn't get that quiche from ticket sales and all that stuff, but more likely, who knows how exactly everything is to be broken down as far as pay goes anyways. Because a lot of times once a thing goes to streaming, like, nobody really sees much of any money past that point, because sadly it is what it is. So yeah, so beside the theater, you can probably go and Google search these two apps that would eventually get you to see currently right now a bootleg version of this film because this isn't early access, there isn't premium access or something on it. Then you could see like a cleaner cut version. But what the version I saw, the bootleg version that I saw, like looked pretty good. Like it even had the subtitles on the bottom of the screen. I was like, yeah, like even better. But like it was like decently like a cleaner variation than the grainy stuff that I'm used to seeing where I'm like I can't clearly make anything out of here. Like but for this movie I was like okay, I can actually see what's going on. I even have subtitles at the bottom of the theater thing for some odd reason. Anyways, so you can go on and Google search a app called Letter C Movies. So it's a letter and then a word. And then you would probably say like app. Google search that on Google. Be able to find this app, download it, and be able to see whatever you want. Movies, shows. Bob's your uncle. If you have an uncle named Bob. The next app, of course, would be an app called Fox HD Movies. The logo will say so, but the title will say something different. It'll say, like, play 1080p HD movies. But the title doesn't matter if you search for the word Fox HD Movies. Hopefully, this app will at some point pop up. You'll be able to find it, you'll be able to download it, and you'll be able to go on and say that you could watch anything that you want. With the powers combined of both those apps together, I tend to reasonably be able to see whatever I want to, even if it's a Stars thing, even if it's a exclusive Apple TV, whatever exclusive thing. I would go on and be able to see whatever. Because really, there are certain times where there's a rare show or movie, but at the end of the day, I could say, well, I'm seeing it. I can see it all if I want to. Because it's my party and I cry if I want to. Anyways, so let's go and double five this bad boy up. Let's just go into spoilers. Because at the end of the day, it is time to say, spoiler time, spoiler time. It's about the time we get to spoil this movie. So, just let's forcibly just get into that action. We don't even need to know that Will is to be a man who is in the military, and he is now out of the military, and he's desperately trying to have this insurance be covered for his wife's experimental cancer procedure, and for some reason they just won't cover it. And Will, of course, is calling any number of these people, hoping that whoever he can like talk and get it connected to will be able to help him, and he continues to just get the runaround because Will is to mention that like this girl is number 12, and Will is like, well, hey, like I just talked to a girl who's number 13 and a girl who's number 11 yesterday. They both know my story. Can I just get transferred to them? And the woman's like, well, I'm sorry, like you're just gonna have to contact me. And then all of a sudden, once she's talking to Will, all of a sudden this girl just says, well, it seems like I'm going to be on a break right now, so I'm going to just hang up. And I'm just like, wait a minute. Why would you take this phone call if you're just going to hang up on this person? Wouldn't you transfer over this thing to somebody else? She just like hangs up the phone, and Will just gets frustrated. So Will goes on and he's like, you know what, like I'm going to go on and I'm going to do this job interview and I'm going to talk to some people and we're going to figure things out. So Will goes on and is to meet up with Danny, who we find out is his brother. Let me reiterate this. So Jake Gyllenhaal is brothers with Will here, and Jake Gyllenhaal's name is Danny. Not quite sure how both of these are brothers, because they don't even look the same. Not talking about color of skin. I'm just saying, like, facially, nothing. Like, I don't see how these two are brothers. And plus, also, I'm just, like, they just wanted to just hire people for this movie, and that's all that mattered. So, pushing on. So, Will meets up with Danny, and it seems that Danny is very busy, but Will desperately needed to talk to him. So Will goes and sees Danny, and all of a sudden, like, while they're talking, trying to, like, catch up about things, talk about Daddy, and kind of talk about some, like, tiny bit of backstory. All of a sudden, we have one guy walk in, and his name is Mel Gibson. He's not the actual Mel Gibson guy. He's just a guy that is to be, like, this very burly, bearded guy. And I'm like, oh, hey, yeah, that's the guy from Doom Patrol. He used to, like, flex his muscles all the time, and magical things would happen. And, like, I think I saw him on some other show also, where he was, like, a ghost or something. But anyways, it doesn't matter. So, this guy named Mel shows up, and he's like, hey, man, we gotta go. Danny, we gotta go. Is this the guy? And Will's like, wait a minute. Like, are you just trying to add me on to whatever you're doing? And Danny's like, well, yeah, you know what? Like, I need you. Like, I need you for a job. And then it's just like, what? They don't even talk about this, and just like Will's like, well, okay, I guess I'll just come along. Because Danny's like, well, yeah, I just need you for a job. Just come with me. We're going to go and orchestrate this whole caper. And, like, you have no clue what's really going on, Will. Like, you have no clue what the plan is. But, like, just come on. Like, we'll figure it out as we go along. So, Will is like, okay. Like, sure, I'll just go into this plan that I know nothing about. And just, we'll figure it out as we go along. Because that's what it feels like this movie does at some points. Just like, just scramble and go left or right or what. Just go in circles. Just dance around in circles for a while. I don't know what you want to do. So, their plan of attack is to go on and try to rob this bank. And so, what happens is there's a bunch of police officers that are like undercover police officers that are kind of having a stakeout by this bank. And they're just kind of waiting around for a reason I just don't quite understand. We have Captain Monroe, who has a dog that was to have some kind of barbecue from the night before. And Captain Monroe is kind of dealing with this dog while he's just kind of driving around. Hopefully we'll figure out this case. I'm like, why would you have your dog while on this case? Whatever, just keep adding random things in. Could we just have a dinosaur just flying into the air and then just like crashes into some building, and then we're like, what was that all about? I don't know. Let's just that isn't important right now. Let's go back to the bank robbery. Anyways, so they're robbing this bank, and we don't really like see much of the actual bank robbery thing. All we really see is like Will and some thug number 2, who actually does have a name. I think it's like Trent. Yeah, Trent. And so we have them starting to grab stuff from these cases and unbox all these things and try to take. But the main focus thing here is we have this police officer that's in uniform who is wanting to decide to try and talk to some girl named Kim, who's a bank teller at this bank. So this officer comes in, and I believe his name is Officer Zach. So Zach comes in and is talking to Danny, and so Danny is just like, well, hey, officer, like, it seems like we're going to be held up for a minute here. Like, just kind of come back and in about 20 minutes. And the guy's like, well, I'm sorry, but, like, I really want to open up the savings here. Like, I'm kind of, like, on the clock right now. And so Danny's like, oh, okay, just come on in. So this guy, instead of actually opening up the savings account, we have Officer Zach that talks to Danny and says, like, well, hey, like, what's this girl's name? And, like, full name. And Danny says that it's, like, Kim Park. So Officer Zach is to try and ask Kim out here. 'Cause movie. And so this guy is taking forever to do this, because he's kind of tripping over his words, and all of a sudden, the officer is to realize that this award that Kim is to win, like, this isn't her last name. And so Danny is to figure out that he didn't get the name right, and so now Danny is to now have the officer realize, like, hey, this is a robbery. This guy from behind me is to have this this gun, and you better get down, yada yada yada. So now, as we, like, finally take forever to get these guys to get all the money together, because I'm like, what were these guys doing this whole time? So once we get the money together, and guys are having these, like, backpacks full of money, and now we're starting to move, and these officers are in this, and we have the kind of the stakeout guys that are trying to figure out what the heck's going on. We have the undercover officers that are talking to the suited officers, like, hey, what's all going on? And so all of a sudden, Officer Zach's partner is to realize that this guy is continuing to move in a very odd-like fashion, and he's like, hey, man, like, something's going down in there. I think they're getting robbed. So these guys decide that they want to kind of, like, they want to try and shoot their way through here, and so that causes a bunch of commotion. And so now we're forced to have everybody just scrambling to get out of here. There's a whole scramble thing about what's going on. We have the getaway driver who is to also mess up as far as getting his car going, and one of the suited officers is to go and try and help him out, and then the truck gets started again. So people are just running all over the place. It doesn't make any sense. I don't know where anybody is. It's freaking confusing as all get out. Trent ends up getting run over by the getaway vehicle, and his legs are crushed. And so we have at one point where the guys are trying to run into the getaway vehicle, and then police officers go on and take down everybody in the getaway vehicle, so that's a waste. So now Will and Danny are, of course, trying to figure out, like, what are they going to do now? Like, since it doesn't seem like they have their getaway vehicle, what are they going to do? So now we have just this officer, and the officer tries to be a hero and is trying to stop these bank robbers by fighting with them. And that ends up having Will, who has to forcibly take down this officer. And so Will is like, "Hey man, like put pressure on this thing." Danny's like, "Are you serious right now? We need to get out of here. We need to move. We need to go. Go, 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 go." And Will is like willing to just like stay by this guy. And it's like, "No, like you're the bad guy here. Go, we need to go. We need to figure." So these guys are scrambling around. We have the other officer coming in who's kind of calling for his partner that there's an officer down. We need an ambulance. So all of a sudden, this ambulance ends up coming in, and they end up carting away this one officer as both Danny and Will are having to shoot their way all throughout this place to figure out where the heck they're going to go. And so they scramble back to this ambulance and take down the ambulance driver and then drive off, with Danny in the back talking to Cam and Will being in the driver's seat. So, of course, this vehicle is to technically stick out like a sore thumb. So once these guys try and drive out of here, we have Will with the ambulance coat on, so people could think that Will is to be the ambulance driver. Danny forcibly has to hide himself in a part of this ambulance. So, because what happens next is we have these undercover police officers who are going into this ambulance trying to figure out what's going on. And Cam is telling them, "Hey, like, this officer is bleeding to death. What are you guys doing?" So they're like, "Okay, just let them go." But then they realize that's a mistake because they're like, "Yeah, that was a cluster F. Like, we couldn't go on, and like there was no good reason to stop these people because like somebody's bleeding to death in the back of their ambulance, so we had to let them go." So, and then they go on to regret it later. So now Danny is talking to Cam, and Cam, of course, mentioned that she likes to be called Cam, and Danny's just like, "Oh, well, that's great that you have a nickname. Like I give a like my name is actually Daniel, but I like to go by Danny. But who cares, right? Like who cares?" So we we go into this story, and it feels like, man, like nobody's really wearing a mask in this movie. Everybody knows who everyone is, and all of a sudden, once anybody is to slip up and reveal who anybody's name is, I'm just like, man, probably none of these people are gonna get out of it alive, or like everything is just gonna be like, "Oh, I usually know who this person is now." So what a cluster of a movie. So we not only have Captain Monroe, who is to have this big massive dog, who mentions that he is to be like the robbery division, and they've been following Jake Gyllenhaal's people for a while to try to track them down. But then on top of it, this FBI agent who is having this therapy session with his husband, and we find out that this FBI agent, all he does is to go on and talk about work when he's home. And his husband is like, "Well, why can't you talk about me? Ask me how I'm doing. Why do you always have to talk about your work?" It's like, well, then leave him. Leave him for somebody else. Like, it feels uh, like this guy may not even give a about if you leave him or not. It's probably just like, meh, like, let's move on to something else. But yeah, so the FBI agent gets a phone call. There's a robbery in progress that he has to go and deal with. So he kisses his hubby and then he leaves. I'm like, I don't even understand why we have to have this FBI agent with this whole therapy session. It feels like a waste. Uh, Giving people jobs is always great and all, but still, like, that whole moment just felt like what a massive, just like, that was a waste. You could have spent character developing on the characters that we're supposed to invest in during that time, but there's so many little goofy things that go on to this movie. Like, we have at one point where Danny is talking to this guy who I guess is technically his assistant, Castro, and Castro is talking about how there's a bunch of flamingos that end up getting delivered by his place, and that also Danny is to talk about this spray painting thing. And so the flamingo and the spray painting thing, they keep talking and talking about it. And so Danny's like forget about the flamingos, just focus on the spray painting thing. And so we find out the whole spray painting thing is for this guy to show up at a specific place at a specific time to then spray down this ambulance, to spray paint it green. And I'm like, that is just. Danny is to even mention how, like, I asked for blue spray paint and you're wanting to spray paint this thing green. This makes no sense, but this movie just makes whatever it is. Anyways, but not only that, so as we're driving along, we're finding out that this officer is to get in worse and worse health. Cause like there's a bullet in this guy and they have to technically get it out. And this guy's losing a lot of blood. All of a sudden Will has to donate blood to this guy so he can stay alive. And Will's also driving this this ambulance. So I'm like, man, I can just like see this character just like going like, man, there's a lot of blood coming out of that guy. So, and he's driving this vehicle. But now they have to perform surgery on this officer, and this ambulance driver obviously isn't a surgeon, so she has to not only go on and call a friend of hers who is a surgeon, but then also they have to go and have a laptop conveniently also in this ambulance to Skype all these trauma doctors to try and get this surgery done that has to deal with some organ that they have to pull out to get this bullet out. And I'm like, man, just like, why is there so much going on now? It comes to be that at some point the battery runs out of that laptop because like these doctors are like giving way too many like discussional things. It's like, hurry up, just like kind of giving the nitty gritty of what exactly to do. So the laptop goes dead, and but luckily they end up saving this officer, and the officer wakes up while this procedure is being done, and Will has to trade spaces with Danny because Will can technically help out in a surgery situation. And so Danny's now driving. So all of a sudden, like the officer is to wake up, Will is to punch him to knock him out, and that works. So they go on and continue to do the surgery, and everything works out. They bandage, of course, this guy up, and so at one point they're stopping. They're completely stopping. Because even though this movie is a chase, like, they not only had to just really slow down as far as pace because surgery is being done, but then on top of that, then they have to just stop completely underneath this bridge. And so all of a sudden, this helicopter is like flying underneath this bridge of like, hey, we need to get to these guys, and we need to, like, this is like Grand Theft Auto, where, like, if you kind of just stop where you are, like, the police just keep on coming, and it just becomes the fact of like, man, like, there's no way for me to get away from these police, even for a moment here. Like, they have to just send this helicopter and like swooping by, and Danny has to like fire on this helicopter to try to scare him off. So they get back into the vehicle, they start driving away, and so weirdly enough, we have the FBI agent who all of a sudden is to start calling Cam, because Cam has her cell phone with her, and the FBI agent is telling Cam to like get down because she's going to have to like stay down because both these guys are going to get shot here. They're gonna try and sniper these guys and kill them both, as they're both going to be driving in the front seat here. So I'm like, God, there's so much going on in this movie. So Cam is to tell the FBI people, or the people who are kind of running the cop show, because at one point we have Captain Monroe, who at some point is to eventually die in this movie. Because there is one point where we have the guys who are run under a man named Poppy. They are to go on and help Danny by orchestrating this one like machined car that has this kind of big sprayer gun that starts killing a ton of officers, and Captain Monroe gets caught in crossfire and he dies. So they try to go on and try to kill the mannequin in this car, but then they realize, oh, like this car wasn't manned. So but we have the FBI agent that knows Danny from previous, like he knows his voice, he knows, like, oh, I know this guy, hey, I know you too, hey, isn't that great? So, like a little catch-up moment, yeah, that's great. So we have two characters that have history together. I'm like, you know what, it would have been nice to... Why not have, like, Ambulance 1 and this be, like, the sequel movie? You could have really had it where, like, Ambulance 1 could have really built up all these characters well to lead us into the sequel where it's like, aha, like, this feels so much like a sequel, it doesn't feel like a first movie. It's so weird. So... So Cam is to tell the guys that they're possibly getting sniped, and so the guys duck, and so the snipers cannot shoot them now. And so Danny is telling the guys, it's like, well, hey, like, are you trying to, like, save these hostages or what? Because Danny at this point is so tempted to just kill off all these hostages, and... like, he starts blasting into the ambulance. That's how just ticked off he is. So they continue to go on driving, and so they make it to this bridge. This bridge can't go on, and have like any cops going in there. We of course also have like the helicopter who now has kind of like mechanical malfunctions. It can't go on and help these people. So that's when they spray the ambulance green, And now all of a sudden, a number of these ambulances are all just driving from off this bridge, and so now they have to track down every single one of these ambulances, besides the green one, weirdly, and try and figure out like who's in these ambulances, which leads to either bombs being done or uh, machine gunned lowriders being fired off, people being dead, all kinds of craziness. So we even had we consistently have moments where Danny is to turn to Will and tell him like, hey, like you can kind of run off now, like you can be safe now, like. And Will is just like, oh no, I just want to keep being in this movie because I want to continue being paid. And Danny's like, oh yeah, because we are in a movie. Yeah, like that's what I feel like is going on here in the mind of just like, well, no, I don't want to run off because I want to continue getting paid. I want to continue being in this movie. It's like, oh, okay, great. Let's keep going with this. So Danny and Will make it to a guy named Poppy, and Poppy is, through all this carnage, is to find out that his son ends up getting killed in the middle of things because we have this officer who's wrestling with this gun, and Poppy's son ends up getting killed in the process. Sadly enough. So when Danny and Will come to meet with Poppy to hand over this big bag of $8 million, Poppy just isn't really all that satisfied enough with this payout because it's like, well, my son got killed. It's like, so what? Like, hey, we were gonna do like a 50-50 split, and considering all of every single one of Danny's men was to die, so we have this standing around moment where we're just like, Poppy's gonna turn on these guys and is gonna try to kill them, but they take forever to get there, and I'm just like, come on already. Like, there's so many times where I'm just like, we know where this is going next. Just get to it. Come on already. Like, slap that ham already. Like, come on. And they're just like, no, we're just going to trickle it out a little bit more. Just make you, like... Here would be the one thing that they should have done. If you're going to stretch this out, even though we already know exactly where this is going to go, it would be nice if they took that long stretch of a time just for them to just kind of swerve us to where we'd probably get just ticked off even more. Just be like, wait a minute. So you took all this time just to be like, well, yeah, like I think everything's fine. Like just go on and go about your ways. But also we have Poppy that isn't satisfied with just taking this money. He also wants Cam and the officer to be dead because Poppy is to realize that these people are witnesses to what is all going down here. And after this whole thing is over, like, both Cam and this officer can go and point them out at some point. So Will won't let the officer and the EMT go. They're like haggling over people, and Will's like, no, I'm not going to give you either one of them. And so now Danny and Will are like at this like crossroads where Danny just keeps on saying, it's like, well, yeah, like you and me now are just like two different people. Yeah, we're just too different. Yeah, just you guys are heavily like so different. And so Danny goes on and is to do the rush hour thing where like, hey, if you go this way, I'll go that way kind of thing, where Danny goes on, he's like, well, yeah, like, if anything, like, we should go left. Go left. And then, and I'm like, man, they really set that up. Like, we're so left wing people. Go left. Left? Just, they shoot everybody up, and then they take the ambulance, and then they leave. I'm like, wouldn't this have been a perfect time to just switch vehicles? But like, I would immediately just been like, you know what, Cam, and you know what, officer, like, you go on, you guys just drive away with this ambulance. We're gonna go and find some car somewhere and get the F out of here. But no, like, we continue with this ambulance because the movie's called Ambulance. So, we have the officer who's to realize that, like, Cam was also, like, working on him and was, like knee or not knee, but hand deep into this man's chest. And she's like, yeah, I saved your life. So, and Cam is to also have this gun because the officer is to find out that his partner gave him some gun. So, while all this stuff is happening, Will decides that he wants to get into the ambulance to protect the people, and Cam shoots Will in the shoulder, but it seems like Will's gonna die in this movie. And we also had this moment where the FBI agent is trying to convince Will to try not to do this because, like, hey man, like, you're gonna spend 30 years in jail. Like, think about that. Like, you're gonna spend 30 years. Like, think about your kid. Think about this. Think about that. So, I'm like, man, this story. Uh, so they get to a point where Danny is thinking that his brother is dead, and because they're like defibbing everybody, they defibbed the officer, they're defibbing Will, and so now Danny wants to figure out who had shot Will, and is to find out that there's a gun in this ambulance, and so he's like, oh, one of you had to shoot him, and Cam's like, I did it, I'm sorry, I shot your brother. So Danny wants to go on and kill Cam, which leads to Cam defibbing Danny. And so the big thing that happens here is Danny is to go out with all these police just surrounding him to want to go on and shoot this woman. And Will decides, because he's still technically alive, goes on and shoots Danny. And Danny goes down. And so now at the end of this whole story, we have like FBI people and officers and whatever who are trying to figure out what had all happened with this story, and who had shot the officer. And the officer is to say, it's like, well, hey, Will saved my life, but so we, I guess, have to just accuse Danny of shooting this officer. So Will is to have both his wife and his son there, or his kid there. And I think we also have it where Cam is to deliver that big batch of money to Will's wife, because Will was to go on and give Cam this big thing of money and say, like, hey, just give this to my wife. If anything happens to me, just hand this over to my wife. I would have just been like, yoink. But no, like, that would be a horrible thing. But still, it's like, well, hey, like, I don't know who his wife is. Sadly enough. Anyways, because Will is to tell Cam that his wife is dealing with cancer. And so, like, there's an experimental treatment, but the problem is it's experimental. And the insurance doesn't want to cover that. And that's why, like, Will is kind of like scrambling all over the place to try to figure out how he can get some kind of coverage for his wife for this experimental procedure, but just like he couldn't get anybody if he tried. So really, this movie just kind of fades out at the end of this. Everything is technically resolved. Cam goes on and is to meet up with her ambulance driver. Like, I think, like, Cam and the ambulance driver, they're like building them up to possibly go on and be dating or something like that. But there's so many little things that don't really matter in this movie. Like, really, the EMTs, or I could care less. So, just being honest. So, with that said, this movie's done. I'm done. I'm gonna get out of here. At the end of the day, I could say that no matter how much I'd probably complained about this movie, I think I would probably want to go on and maybe watch this movie like again at some point. But really, with the way that my life turns out, I probably wouldn't have that convenient amount of time just watch a movie again, unless I was going to review it at some point. Um, so yeah, with that said, I'm gonna get out of here. Bye bye. Bye bye.